Hello, welcome to Other People's Kids, a podcast about Andy and Joey's adventures in fostering and adoption.
Hello and welcome to everyone who is discovering this podcast. Hope you enjoy it and good to have you.
Yep, we're two dads talking all things fostering, adoption, parenting and more. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Joseph. How are you this week?
I'm very good. We're using our formal full names, Andrew and Joseph.
Well, got to keep it formal, haven't we? So,
Yeah.
Joseph, yes, good to see you. Have you had a good week?
I've had a pretty good week. Yeah, it's been interesting. So it started. I fulfilled a lifelong ambition, Andy.
Tell me
I
more.
appeared in the Guardian newspaper.
Oh yeah, I saw that, but didn't really read it. What was all that about?
So I was asked, as a foster carer who also works, to contribute to a piece about busyness and managing time. And I wrote this whole thing about it's important to be productive and not overly busy, but focus on productivity, blah, 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 blah. And then when it was released, I just had a couple of sentences in this article. It's Joey Bowers says he actively avoids being busy. So, for the past week, I've had friends and colleagues messaging me, checking that I'm not actively doing anything. So I'm not sure it really came across quite right, but it was a dream to be in the Guardian, so it's quite exciting.
Oh, well done. But you were misquoted. You misrepresented.
Slightly, but my point was, I think we can be busy and not really do much, or we can
Yeah.
be productive. And I think sometimes, taking your time, having lots of breaks, kind of prioritizing what's important in your work and your family means you're more productive than just running around.
I really envy those people who can finish a task just by starting it and then finishing it like within a small segment of time.
How about your week, Andy?
It's been okay. The weather has been up and down, very rainy on Wednesday, but lovely and sunny today. I think my mood sometimes gets affected by how the weather is, so I'm feeling chipper and upbeat today. But yeah, work is busy, family is busy. It's all good. But you've been doing something extra special this week, haven't you, for Foster Night Fortnight?
What, Foster Night Fortnight?
Fostering Fortnight.
Fostering Fortnight. Yeah, it's been a very. I mean, ironically, after appearance in the newspaper, I've been really busy the last 2 weeks. I've been travelling around, visiting various events, raising the awareness of the work of foster carers, the importance of fostering, and it's been brilliant. And one of those was earlier in the week. I attended the Foster Care Walk. So we do that every year in different places around the UK. And we gathered, I think it was over 120 people in Cardiff, and we walked through the city in our orange and various coloured T-shirts, and it was a really good event. We were also joined by Fatima Whitbread on the walk. Have you heard of her?
I have. I saw her on the Jungle program. Have you seen her on the Jungle program?
I haven't. So for me, I just remembered her javelin days, which is a long time ago, and only just. But yeah, I found that lots of young people have seen her on the Jungle program, so it's very exciting. And she came along because she started a new campaign that focuses on protecting and supporting vulnerable children and young people, particularly those who've been in care. So she's got experience of her own of being in care. It's great to hear about that. Quite exciting, really. So she's launching that sort of as we speak around the UK. Something to do with a cockroach up her nose.
Yeah,
Quite famously. So it was a really good week, and it was really lovely weather, and it kind of leads into our big bit of news for this week for the pod. So we have some pod news. We've ventured into the world of video. So I spoke to marketing people, and they said, really, to get engagement and to get your podcast out there, to get it listened to by lots of people who might be interested to find out about fostering, adoption, and parenting, you need some video content. So we have started creating some short videos, which is very exciting. If you want to see them, you need to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You might see them on social media, but best way to see them is on YouTube.
So, Joe, what are we doing today?
Today, I was fortunate enough to interview Stuart this week. This is someone I've got to know through work. He's a really interesting guy, and he's done an awful lot. So he's a parent, he's a foster parent, he's an SGO parent, which we talk about quite a bit in the interview. He's also a trainer for foster carers when they first become foster carers. And he's also, interestingly, what came out when I was talking to him, he also used to work in residential settings, so supporting care experienced young people in residential homes. So he's got a wealth of experience, and it was really lovely to chat to him, to hear a bit more about that, to think about SGO, and to just hear his story.
Well, great. Well, why don't we do that? Here's Stuart.
Well, welcome, Stuart, to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite, Joey.
Yes, you are our first official guest.
Okay, well, that's an honour.
So, just before we kind of get into the kind of main of our questions, do you want to just say who you are and a bit of information about yourself?
Yeah, cool. So my name's Stuart. I'm a foster carer. We've got 3 children, and myself and my wife, we've been fostering for like almost 10 years now. So it's something that we've been doing for like a big chunk of our kids' life and our relationship too. So yeah, it's something we really enjoy. As well as being a foster carer, I also deliver training courses to foster carers, and I kind of specialize in that pre-approval course that all all families that are considering fostering need to do. So yeah, that's my bag.
Yeah, that's how I think how I first met you, Stuart. So we'd moved into a new city and we're retraining to become foster carers for a new local authority. And I remember our skills to foster session. We turned up, and there was this guy called Stuart there who was really good. So I think that's the first time I met you. But we now sort of work together sometimes. We both foster. We live quite near each other.
Yeah,
Mm. So
yeah,
yeah,
do. And we've become friends, haven't we, Joey?
we have.
In that in that sort of like process of working with one another and hanging out, but also doing something in terms of fostering that not a lot of other people will understand. So I think that's drawn us together because it's a bit of a strange thing to do with your life, isn't it? Really, fostering.
Mm.
So you need people around you who get it.
Definitely. Yeah, I've really appreciated just when we've met up, just chatting through sort of problems and issues and moans that I think other people wouldn't really get who hadn't been involved in fostering.
Yeah.
So I found that really helpful.
Yeah, it's really valuable to just have somewhere to go and just to have a bit of a vent sometimes. And you definitely fulfill that criteria for me. So yeah, those coffees are really valuable to me.
And what was it that made you want to foster in the first place?
So there's a couple of things really. Casting my mind back like 16 years ago when I first became a dad, my wife very clearly remembers an experience that she had that kind of went over my head in terms of me being really focused on the excitement of becoming a dad, but what had happened in the shared side bay, because there was like 4 beds in the side bay of the maternity ward, and obviously my wife and my daughter was in one of those bays, but in another of the bays was a young lady who had had her child removed at birth.
Wow.
And I think for my wife that was a really significant moment. She'd just become a mum, and she witnessed another mum. The daughter was born on the same day, girl as well. And in terms of my wife's journey, that kind of made her always remember that experience. So when we had birthdays, when our daughter went to high school, it kind of sometimes makes us reflect on what happened to that other girl who went into foster care. Did she go back to her mum? Did she not? Did she get adopted? So that was something that happened like kind of 16 years ago that more profoundly affected my wife than it did me, because it happened in front of her eyes and I wasn't there during that moment when the social worker was literally taking the child in a car seat, in a baby seat. So I ended up with a few different jobs that kind of led me towards becoming a foster carer, or certainly having that moment where it felt like the right path for us and for me. So I worked as a support worker. I worked as a support worker first off within the mental health sector, sort of helping clients who'd been on a mental health section kind of back into their independence, and they were perhaps leaving hospital and going back to family life. So I did that in terms of a tenancy support role. But then I got a job working for a charity with care leavers, And it sounds cliched, but that's the job that changed my life, because there's two standout moments in that role, really, Joey, that kind of were light bulb moments where I just thought I just want to be a foster carer. One's a really positive and one's not so positive. So we'll start with a positive. There was an amazing foster family, and there was a young man who'd got his tenancy. He was living in, quite a difficult part of town, and he was being preyed upon. Vulnerable. He was 17. He had a learning issue, and he had his leaving care grant taken from him by kids who, young adults older than him, but certainly they dominated him. He had the money that he was given to set up his accommodation taken from him by people that had, in inverted commas, like befriended him. And he was super vulnerable. And we made referrals to social services as a team, and they really blew me away in their response. He was 17, and they recognised that he was a child in need of additional support. He was brought into foster care at 17, and he was just matched with this really lovely family who specialised in caring for teens. He was blown away, by moving in there. He was so relieved because he was genuinely scared in his flat. And I just remember driving home, and I'd driven home from meeting with this young man loads of times, but that time I just drove home feeling he's safe.
Mm.
Prior to that, I was driving home thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to happen this weekend? How are we going to get him a sofa? How are we going to get him sorted? Because the money's gone.
Wow.
He didn't have to worry about that anymore. So that for me was just like, wow, that was so inspirational.
You also mentioned a more negative story as well.
There was, so I just want to preempt this by saying that I know loads of foster carers. I am a foster carer, and 99% of foster carers that I meet are really kind and lovely people who are motivated to foster to make a difference and change a life. But this young lady that I supported, who when she got her first tenancy, perhaps had the 1%, in that she'd been in foster placement with that family for about 6 years. And she was studious, she was polite, she was a really nice young lady. So it didn't make any sense to me why the foster carer, on the day that she moved out of her foster placement into her accommodation, never visited, never phoned her, didn't help her set up her accommodation, didn't offer to help put her flat pack wardrobes up. And she did kind of struggle setting up that accommodation, which is why she was referred to the tenancy support scheme, which is what I was a part of. But I remember like helping in terms of grant applications, and let's get you a sofa, let's get you funding for a washing machine if that's available. And she kind of interrupted me and just sort of said, that's all really important, thank you. But I'm most worried about not having a curtain pole, because she lived in a block of flats. And she was concerned that people in the opposing block of flats could see into her bedroom or living room. But when she was coming out of the shower, she felt very vulnerable in that she could be seen.
Mm.
As a dad to two daughters at that point, it just really struck me that this is not good enough,
Mm.
and that someone somewhere could have done something to have taken that away from this 18-year-old young lady. Somebody. So we as a charity were able to put her curtain pole up, but it was so important to her that that was done. It could have been done as an offer of support before she moved in. Why didn't the foster carer ring a handy person up and just get somebody to stick some curtain poles up to protect her dignity?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think from your experience of being part of a service that supports children becoming adults, so I think it has different names, doesn't it, in the UK, sort of, and
Leaving care.
it's leaving care. That's the one. It's interesting because I think as foster carers, I think there's a need for foster carers to support that process, and I think sometimes we don't think about that bit of foster care and the kind of moving on, because whilst there might be a service there, actually that is still a child becoming an adult who needs support, who needs to know they're loved, who needs to know that they've got adults who are there for them. we're looking out for them, for all those little things, putting up curtain poles, giving them lifts, giving them their first, big shop. I would say every sort of September. So I live in a university city, and I see all the parents bringing their kids to the supermarket and doing that big shop, but getting them all sorted, going to IKEA, getting all the furniture they need. And you think, wow, if you were a young person who'd been in care and you didn't have that, how much harder it is at start to adult life. So
Yeah.
it's really helpful to hear, I guess, the negative and the positives, but it's I think that experience, I can see why that would lead you to want to become a foster carer, to do it better.
Yeah, and just going back to the example of the young man who at 17 was, he was brought into foster care. And at 18, you're an adult. So
Mm,
for a lot of 18-year-olds, like you just said, Joey, that care, that offer of support will stop or definitely taper because you're preparing for adulthood. He was so vulnerable. So when that happened, it kind of made me feel like he's 18 and I want to be part of that process to help embed a child within family if they need that long-term family commitment. I just felt like we have something to offer and we wanted to share that as a family, like a safe place, that love, that family membership, for us to switch that off, or for a foster family to literally flick the switch because the child has now become an adult, they're 18, they're moving out. I think that's a huge contradiction in terms of the message of you have family membership, you belong, you are loved, you're here, you're part of us. That young lady felt like she was dropped like a stone,
mm,
and she was really switched on and sort of had an opinion that the money had run out. The foster carer wasn't being paid. Therefore, for her, they stopped
mm.
showing interest, stopped being a consistent part of her life. And, for us, that's not something that we would do. We would continue, as long as that young person wanted to maintain that link. Where'd you go on Christmas Day if you haven't got somebody? Come to our house. Where'd you go when your washing machine breaks or you get a scary letter? Ring us. That's what we wanted to offer, and that's what really sort of like weighed on our hearts when I came home and sort of shared the positive experience. Myself and my wife was like, "Wow, that's really inspirational." But even the negative experience that kind of moved us to get involved.
Earlier on, you mentioned, Stuart, that you were an SGO parent. So I wonder if I could just ask a bit more about what SGO is, how you kind of got to that point, and sort of what the difference between fostering and SGO is, and adoption. Because in my mind, it sort of sits in between, but it's kind of permanency, so it is almost closer to adoption. I don't know if that's right, but it'd be helpful to know from your experience what
Yeah,
is.
well, for us, it certainly feels like permanency. It is, as a foster carer, we are we are carers. So even though we're offering family, we're offering love, and we do love all the children that we care for, there's quite a stark difference in terms of our role as foster carers, in that we don't have parental responsibility, so we can't make decisions without consulting local authorities, the team around the child, social workers, parents. So in terms of our decision making power or responsibility in that regard, we don't have any. So around operations or which school a child might go to, we don't have the final say. We definitely have opportunities to share opinions, but that's not something that we can make decisions. And that's where it really differs from like my role as a dad, as a parent, because schools decisions around, does the child have a haircut? Does the child get a passport? Are we going to take the child on holiday? As a dad, we just got to make those decisions as a family, and it was nobody else's business. We didn't have to consult with anyone. As a foster carer, it's completely the opposite. There's processes, permissions, and there's a huge need to get that permission. So I suppose being a special guardianship parent or carer, I can't. It kind of gives you that parental responsibility in that um, you don't have it all because we share it with the child's birth parents.
So the birth parents still retain a bit of parental responsibility, but you
It's
also have that
shared.
as well. Okay,
It's
I didn't know that.
shared.
Yeah.
It's shared. But in terms of decision making on a day-to-day basis, the child lives with us.
Mm.
So it then very much depends on the relationship you've got with the child's parents as to how much they consulted. Because I know that there are some special guardianship carers who have obviously the care of the child, they live with them, and maybe their parents don't engage, they aren't able to, see the child on a regular basis. So in that case, the holders of that SGO would just be able to live quite a normal family life in
Mm.
terms of making decisions in absence of the presence of the other decision makers. So the kid gets to have a life whereby they don't have a social worker anymore. As a child who's under a special guardianship order, they're no longer a child in care. So they don't have a social worker. They don't have regular review meetings. We don't have to ask permission and wait for a letter to say we can go on a holiday. We just get to live quite a normal family. And I think for our child, what that means for her is that there won't be that stigma that I think some children in care perhaps feel about feeling different, feeling, why have I got a social worker? Why do I have to go to a meeting? And that's something that we were quite clear about when we were asked about permanency. Could we commit to this child forever? Absolutely, because she'd stolen our hearts at that point. She'd lived with us for 3 years. But I suppose our request was that we were able to make those decisions. So she had as much of a typical childhood as we could give her.
Mm. And so as her special guardians, there's less obviously interaction with social services. Don't have a social worker anymore. But am I right in thinking that you still have more access to support if needed than say if you had adopted? Is that right?
Yeah, so that's what we're told. In terms of if we need, maybe it could be help with trying to get a referral to a particular medical area, we could lean on social services to say, look, this is a child who was in care previously, and we need this support. So the way it was described to us by the social worker who supported us through our assessment, because we had to do a full assessment to become our daughter's SGO carers, it was described as the door's never fully closed, it's left ajar. There's a team of people who would be very interested and able to offer you help, advice, guidance should you ever need it.
That's good. I guess it's quite reassuring, isn't it? Having access, to therapies and things like that, and funding, and
Another thing that they could help with, Joey, is the dynamic of power is kind of shifted, because as a foster carer, the social worker gets to make those decisions, and we can sometimes use that as as an opportunity to pass the buck, for want of a better phrase, where say if there's a area of friction or of challenge where the parents saying, why is this allowed to happen? I can say, well, it's a social worker's advice, it's in the care plan, this is the way we've been told to do it. When we've got that SGO in place, it's very much a case of we have 50% parental responsibility, therefore the day-to-day living decisions we get to make,
mm,
even around, how often that child might see members of their family. We have a big say in whether that's in her interests or not, which kind of shifts that dynamic of power into our favor. So it could be we need some guidance on how we're going to navigate this. Should the contact with birth family members be supervised in a contact center? Should it be out and about in the community? Or maybe if a parent is unable to commit, should it happen at all?
mm.
They're big decisions, so it's important to have that support from the team if a guardian carer would need that.
And do you get financial support for for being a special guardian of a
Yes,
child?
yes, we do, but it's very much on a case by case basis, and that's another difference to being a foster carer. When you're a foster carer, you either with a local authority that has a clearly defined pay structure, or you are with an independent fostering agency, and both will do the same. They'll say we'll pay. There might be a skill recognition or length of service or complexity of child, and the payment might differ in that regard. But as a special guardianship, it's very much, in my experience, a negotiation in terms of how long, at what level, does it taper, might it change?
So I imagine if so the child had sort of particular needs that might lead to more, costs in the future, would that be sort of factored in, like a medical need or high dependency or
Yeah,
that
yeah.
sort of
And,
okay.
in terms of the assessment, we were guided by a solicitor. So we were told to get independent legal advice. They looked at the plan that was being put forward. They made some suggestions to kind of try and help us in the future, to ask us questions about what happens, when she's 18. And we were just like, well, nothing changes when she's 18. She calls us mum and dad. So for us, this is a forever commitment. But we were asked some quite challenging questions about how we would meet the challenges of this child's childhood, what support we needed put in place in black and white. And ultimately that was the plan that was put before the court, that was signed off by a judge.
So, sort of changing slightly. So, at the beginning, Stuart, you mentioned one of the roles that you do is you're involved in training foster carers and particularly delivering the course that foster carers would do when they first sort of sign up and start doing. So, I'm really interested to know from your experience of that, particularly, and also as a foster carer yourself, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about becoming a foster carer?
I would just say that fostering for me is something I'm incredibly proud to do. So it's not all rainbows and unicorns, as you know, Joey. There's some really hard days as a foster carer. As a job, because job's quite a contentious word, but as a job,
Yeah.
it's the one I'm the most proud of, being a foster carer. But it's also the one that's challenged me the most emotionally. I've certainly cried the most as a foster carer than I have in any other role that I've done. I would just say if it's on your heart to do it, just make some inquiries. Just get involved, speak to your local authority, because it genuinely has. And I know these cliches are overused. It's changed my life. It really has. It's enriched our family. It's grown our family. We met our daughter through fostering, who we're just talking about in terms of having an SGO order for. It's made my kids' lives enriched. It's made them better humans. I think their experience of being part of a foster family, drawing close, sometimes more close than perhaps their peers have ever needed to some sad stuff, some trauma, some loss, some real grief and heartache, has led them to develop an empathy
Mm.
and just a kindness towards helping people that I'm incredibly proud of. And they've had to sacrifice, as we all have as a family, because when a child comes to live with us, Joey, like you guys will know, it's all about them. It's settling. So my kids were quite young when we started fostering, but they're playing a massive part of our fostering team. And some of the things we've achieved as a family that I'm most proud of, it's it's what the children have done,
Mm.
in terms of welcoming children, showing kids how to play. We've had kids come to our home severely neglected, and they've not known toys. They've not known sharing. They've not known what you do with a dolly or a car on the floor. And what better person to role model that than another child? And seeing that happen in my living room has been a real privilege, and the magic has happened in the and I know that sounds like a bit of a cheesy thing to say, but when you see it happen, you think, "Whoa, my kids are doing that. That's wonderful."
Mm.
So to come back to the question, I would just say get involved, go on a skills to foster, because if you show an interest with your local authority, there'll be that initial visit. They'll come out, they'll have a chat with you. They'll just check that you're expectations of what the realities of fostering are realistic. What can you offer? They'll have a brief look around the house to check, is it suitable for what they need. Have you got a spare bedroom? All those really boring practical stuff, you need that. If you're going to foster a child who's, not an infant, they're going to need their own bedroom. But beyond that, then you will be invited to a Skills to Foster course, and that is very much pre-approval. That is very much about dipping your toe into the world of fostering to figure out, is it for you? It's like test driving a car almost. Is it for you? Yes, no, maybe in the future, definitely not. It's fine. We don't see one outcome as successful and the others as unsuccessful. It's just about figuring out, is it for you? And those 3 days of training are really powerful, moving, emotional, but really insightful, and allow people to go away and really mull it over and think about, is it for them? But for me, it's been a massive privilege, and I'm really proud to do it.
Thanks, Stuart. As anyone who's listened to the podcast before knows, we do like to finish when we're talking to people interviewing with something a little bit different. So my sort of different question for you, Stuart, is do you have a favourite book to read to your children?
Yeah, I do. Um, and for me, this book is a favorite because it just reminds me of being a child, having this story read to me. So my mum used to read this story to me when I was in primary school. It's The Tiger Who Came to Tea.
Okay.
So The Tiger Who Came to Tea for me is just a really cozy book about something that's a bit bonkers happening, but it's all right in the end. So yeah, I love reading that story.
Thanks, Stuart. So yeah, is that the Judith Kerr book?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
author, yeah.
And the illustrations are really lovely,
Beautiful.
really beautiful. But it's a story for me. It's a bit bonkers. There's a knock at the door and it's a tiger and nobody's phased. Everyone's just like, okay, come on,
It's
come
quite
on.
normal.
Yeah. It's not the milkman because he's already been. It's not the vegetable delivery. It's not daddy because daddy's got his keys. So, oh, it's a tiger in your pot. And it's like, right, let's make him welcome. What would you like? He drinks all the tea, he drinks all the water out the pipes, he drinks all the cakes, he drinks daddy's beer. And then when dad comes home from work, let's just go to the cafe. So like dad, even dad's not phased that all of this happened. So it's all okay because they just have sausage and chips at the cafe. And I just really like, it's really basic. And I suppose I could have picked a book that had a deeper meaning and was really relevant to fostering, but I think it's just this message of it's okay.
Yeah.
I think that's what the book, it gives me that warm, fuzzy feeling.
Do you do the voices for the tiger?
Yeah.
I won't ask you to do them now.
Yeah, because I'm not going to.
I'm going to do it now. Well, Stuart, thank you so much for your time today. It's been
No
really,
worries.
it's been because I know you fairly well, but actually hearing just a bit more detail about how you, particularly with your journey from fostering into SGO, and particularly why you fostered in the first place, some of that I didn't know, and also just really lovely to hear the impact that fostering had on your children, on your daughters, because Helen and I have sons, and I think sometimes people think, oh, maybe we shouldn't foster if we have children already, but actually, I think it really adds to the family, doesn't it? I think it's lovely to hear that.
No, you're right. And it's something that comes up again and again in the Skills to Foster course, whereby perhaps someone's on the course and they feel inspired to foster, but a big part of their doubt comes from maybe extended family members or friends saying, don't do it just yet, wait for your kids to grow up. And whilst that might be what's best for some people, it certainly wasn't what was best for us because we just felt we have a young family, we've got a nice, loving, stable, caring home environment, and we want to share that. And I think if it's one of our strengths that there are other children in our home, so
Mm.
that kids can relate to other kids. And it even extends to our family dog. Our family dog is a part of our fostering team because some kids they're really excited there's a dog here. They're really excited that they can play with a ball in the garden with the dog.
Well, thank you so much, Stuart, for joining us in the podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, it's been lovely to chat with you. Cheers, Joey.
Oh, thank you, Stuart. What a great story. What a great guy, Joe.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It was really interesting talking to him.
And I really enjoyed, just really insightful, just hearing the difference between the SGO and the adoption landscape. And obviously, we chatted before about having parental responsibility and how that's different in different scenarios. So that was great for him to really unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah, so because I didn't quite realise that the birth parents with an SGO still retain some PR.
Mm,
So still, I mean, it depends. I think it's sort of negotiated, have some involvement in decision making in the sort of. However, because with SGO, the predominantly because the child's living with you as their now parent effectively, because you have some of that PR or a good portion of it, you therefore can make just those important decisions for them. So there's less involvement of social services, social
mm,
workers. So it gives that kind of normal life, really, doesn't it, for the child? That stability, not having to worry about outside influence, and the family can do their own thing, really, which I think is
mm.
really important.
No, spot on. I really loved how you were saying having an SGO/fostering team. I remember when you were saying when your boys didn't they get a badge? Didn't they become like a foster carer person badge when you first became a foster carers?
Yeah, so in the local authority we first fostered in, our boys were recognised. So we were given cards as foster carers, but they also had their own card each with their name and their picture and foster care. And I think that's always carried over with them, that kind of they're very much part of us as a fostering family. Same as Stuart was saying with his daughters. That
Mhm.
actually seeing my boys and how they relate to these children has been wonderful. I think they've become more compassionate and kinder. And it's, there are negatives. It can be restricted what we can do in terms of holidays sometimes. Sometimes we're caught up with trips to the hospital or social worker meetings. But on the whole, it's been a real positive for our children, definitely.
Yeah, really interesting to hear the impact on his kind of initial family.
I mean, so I thought particularly was interesting was he talked about his role in residential care and how what kind of got him into fostering was the experience of working with a child or a young person who had been in care and then suddenly was sort of thrust into adulthood with no real support. That
Mm.
actually, she was in foster care and suddenly she didn't have anyone supporting her. And I just thought, wow, imagine that. I think, when I first left home, I went to university, I did a gap year. My parents were helping me, giving me lifts to places. Like Stuart said, I just can't imagine how hard it would be without that support. So that I thought was really interesting because we talk about fostering children, but actually for foster carers, when those children grow up and become adults, there's a whole other sort of thing we need to think about is how we support them as they become adults in an ongoing way. Because when I
Yeah,
was 18, I was not ready for the world on my own. That's for sure.
no, absolutely. And I know there are charities and organizations who do put some
Mm.
support in place when someone turns 18. But yeah, it could be very scary kind of having that full time or a lot of support and care and that kind of dropping off dramatically. I can imagine that's quite a scary experience. So thank you, Joe, and thank you, Stuart, for doing that really insightful interview. What are we doing next week, Joe?
And we're going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of adoption and fostering. So we're going to get a bit honest and we're going to think about maybe two or three of the things that we think are great about it, but also have a bit of a focus on some of the real challenges of being an adoptive or a parent or being a foster carer, because it's not always easy. We love it, but it's really not that easy sometimes, is it? And we're going to
I've thought of
explore.
some genuine ones and I thought of some tongue-in-cheek ones as well, just some whimsical examples.
Yeah, we're going to focus on the honest ones and maybe a few joke ones as well. But I think, I've spent the last 2 weeks going all over the place talking to foster carers, and some of the stories are heartbreaking, some of the challenges they face, and it's amazing they're still doing it. So I'm really hoping we can have an honest conversation about the challenges. And if you've been listening and you'd like to be on the podcast, perhaps interviewed, we think you've got an interesting story you'd like to share, we'd love you to get in touch, or you might just want to ask us a question. We'd love to hear from you. It'd be nice to know that you're there. So hello at otherpeopleskids.co.uk, or you can reach out through social media platforms.
Do reach out. Do we want to address the elephant in the room?
The elephant in the room. What's that, Andy?
Well, the fact that you won the fantasy football competition for this season.
I did.
Congratulations.
One of us
Publicly
had.
acknowledge you.
It was. Thank you for publicly acknowledging my success. And actually, it was actually a thrashing in the end, wasn't it? I beat you by 2 game weeks.
Didn't Mateta have a hat trick or something?
He did, and I was there in the stadium to watch him
Yeah.
destroy your fantasy football dreams. It was a gloriously sunny, wonderful day in
I'm actually glad you won it the week before, because I would have been like super mega gutted if I just needed to win that final game and you just smashed me. I would have been very not happy. But yes.
Well, for any listeners who don't like fantasy football, sorry.
Tough.
But for any who do, maybe we'll have a league next season. We could have another People's Kids League.
Oh, maybe we could have, yeah, like an entry code. And if you're hearing this, you could join our other people's kids mini league.
Might just be us and our mums.
Yeah, it could be. At least we would win.
Anyway, have a great week, Andy.
And you, Jerry. Bye for now.
That's all right, isn't it? For a
Yeah.
I'll edit that to make some sort of sense.